Good evening, everybody. Hello, and welcome to the second installment of the podcast For Those About to Pod. We Salute You, hosted by me, Brian Maley, and my co-host, Mr. Matt Rogers. How are you, Matt?
Hello, Brian. Yeah, I'm doing very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm pretty good. It's all dark and dreary in Edinburgh. But doing good,
Well,
doing good. How are you?
Isn't it always? No, I shouldn't say that. No, I'm sure Edinburgh's a lovely place.
It is.
And of course, I'm in England, and we're into week one of the new lockdown, which is, it is what it is. But no, it's fine. It's fine. I was just admiring your Thin Lizzy Rock Legends, which we talked about last time.
We did indeed.
Yeah. You were going to talk us through what you thought about it, and I know you probably haven't had time to listen to all 75 CDs, or whatever it is that you get with it. But I know you're extremely biased because they are your favourite band or second favourite band. I can't remember which is which, Brian. We'll have to. I don't know. We'll regroup on that at some point. But what do we think about the new Lizzy box set?
You're absolutely right. I haven't listened to all of the CDs yet, but having had a look through the box set has been wonderfully. I think the phrase is wonderfully curated.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Yeah. What's nice about it is you get a couple of books. It's not just the CDs. It's loads of live tracks. There's a 1980s Chinatown track, a Chinatown tour CD, loads of rarities, loads of demos. It's really good. What's really nice is the books that come with it. You've got a hardback book with all of the tour programs. So if you're like me and you like to have tour programs, it's got all of them in there, right up to the final Thunder and Lightning. It's got a book of Phil's lyrics, which is really nicely done. It's got some lovely prints. And I think what is really nice is there's a little booklet called Still in Love with You, which is a nice, it's members of the band just reflecting on the legacy of Thin Lizzy. All the members, Scott, who are still alive, obviously Scott, Brian Downey, John Sykes, but loads of Lemmy / just reflecting on Phil's and Thin Lizzy. It's not all about Phil, it's the band itself, and their legacy, which is great. And all I can hope for, Matt, is that if the way in which the Rock Legends box set is being lovingly created, if the film, which came out a couple of weeks ago, is done as nicely as that, then I'll be a happy man. So at the moment, my favourite band on the planet is Thin Lizzy.
Very good. Pleased to hear it. We did promise ourselves we wouldn't turn this into an homage to our favourite bands, didn't we?
We did. That's it. No more Lizzy.
Well, okay. Yeah. So this is the first time we've spoken since the first time we got together, and I thought that I had to say thank you to people who listened to our first podcast, which we found hugely enjoyable to do. Obviously, and also thanks for people who took the time to, give us feedback on it. Generally, very positive. We are still waiting for John Law's essay on it, aren't we?
We are indeed.
But maybe that will come. Maybe that's just something we need to look forward to, like Christmas, which isn't far away. So no, that's great. I mean, here we are again.
We are
fantastic. Yeah. You were going to ask me, I think, if anything has caught my eye lately.
What's caught your eye, Matt, this week? In the week of rock, what's
in the week of rock? I was thinking about it's a strange expression that catch your eye, but I think I know what you mean. So I'm quite excited
Okay.
about new music that's coming out at the moment. We talked a lot last time about the AC/DC album, which is on its way soon. Um, and there's a few songs come out recently which have caught my ear as well
Okay.
as my eye. Um, New song by a band called Eden Thorn, young band from the northeast, who I've seen a couple of times on festivals down the bill a little bit.
Yeah.
Excellent four-piece, great singer, great musicianship. Hopefully, they're going to be a big deal going forward. All things being equal. Good new song called "A Matter of Opinion." Scott Stapp, the erstwhile singer of the excellent, in my opinion, Creed,
Yeah.
not everyone's cup of tea, of course, has a new song out called "The World I Used to Know," which is quite nice, quite poignant. I've not analysed it too much, but I think we'll find that things will maybe music will reflect the times we're in. Um, um, Also, a song by the much maligned, and I'm going to get your view on them in a minute, but the much maligned Greta Van Fleet. Actually, they're not maligned by everyone. A lot of people like them, of course, but they've got a really good song out at the moment called "My Way Soon," which I actually really like, and I'd be interested to know, Brian, what your thoughts are on uh, GVF, Greta Van Fleet,
Greta Van
and this
Fleet.
whole Led Zepp thing, and the comparisons therewith. And you know what? I'm going to let you talk, and I'm going to give you my opinion. So, what do you think of the Greta Boys?
The Greta Boys. So, like
That's
most,
not their real name, by
no,
the way.
no,
I just
no,
gave them
no,
that
no,
name,
no,
but you know what I
no.
mean.
So, like most phenomenons which come out of, classic rock, planet rock, who's going to be the next Iron Maiden, who's the next Zeppelin. I ran to the hills. Forgive the pun. So I ran to,
Forgiven.
yep, I ran to the hills and really, really kind of stayed away from it. I just thought, oh my goodness, everybody's bigging up this young band, and I never gave them the time of day. I just thought, if somebody's trying to be, if somebody's sounding like Zeppelin, I'm not interested. However, whenever you sent me the link to the Red Rocks, the show that they did, I was musically really impressed with the band, and I thought, they're young guys, just in their early 20s. I thought the songwriting was excellent. I thought the musicality was superb.
Mm-hmm.
I just thought, from a stage presence perspective, I kind of went, you all don't need to wear the dragon suit, so you don't all need to look like Jimmy Page. But I was very pleasantly surprised with Greta Van Fleet, and the tracks that they played went through from their initial EP to some new material, and you can see the evolving of their songwriting. So I am a fan, and it must be tough for them, when you reflect on it, when you're a young band coming up, and when somebody says, "Hey, you're going to be the new Led Zeppelin," those are big shoes to fill, and they're also big high expectations. And I have to say, at Red Rocks, they're certainly no Led Zeppelin, but they are really, really good. And I hope their sound evolves. That it becomes, don't want to say derivative, because it's not. It's just they happen to sound like a 70s rock, like an early 70s band. So to me, I was very pleasantly surprised.
Yeah. I mean, I have to say, my view of them has changed a little bit in that I was thinking, actually, I suppose if you're a young band, to be compared to someone of the magnitude of Led Zeppelin is quite something in its own right.
Yeah.
Secondly, they do sound a bit like them, but then you could argue, and I was thinking of a couple of examples. Then the very excellent Airborne, that we've seen a few times, embrace the fact that they sound very similar to AC/DC, and they
Yes.
do. I mean, there's no two ways about it. And then secondly, there's always been a kind of a bit of emulating is the right word, I think. Emulating your heroes. And I was watching an interview with Roger Daltrey, and he talked about Jimi Hendrix smashing up his guitar. This is not like 50 odd years ago,
Mm.
and he got that idea from Pete Townsend. So it just illustrates the point. A couple of examples there from different ends of the spectrum that sometimes things may sound similar to other artists, singers, but in a way, it's not always a bad thing. So I'm warming to them, I have to say, as an outfit, as a band, and I think they probably had some unduly harsh criticism. I remember the Guardian called them a Led Zepp tribute band that does their own songs, which I think was a bit harsh. But anyway, that's enough about them. A couple of albums that have come out or coming out. I'm quite excited about the new Iron Maiden live album. I don't know what album that is, live album that is. They've done quite a few. It's called Nights of the Dead from the Legacy of the Beast tour, I think, or is it the tour before that? There's also a new Foo Fighters album, which is in the offing, called Medicine at Midnight. I think that comes out next year, so we've got a little bit of time to talk about that. We thought with Thunder, they've got a new album coming out. We mentioned that last time. A new song off that called Last One Out, Turn Off the Lights. So, and on top of that, you've got the new album from Blackstone Cherry, which is called The Human Condition. So what I've heard of all those is all good. The other thing which caught my eye was something that I read was about Bruce Springsteen, which his new album is called Letter to You, is in the Billboard charts, and he's the first artist to have a top 5 album in the Billboard charts in 6 decades, which is quite some achievement, wouldn't you say?
I would say that, and for an artist who I wouldn't say, I wouldn't say that I'm the biggest fan of Bruce. I have a few of his greatest hits. I have to say, I was lucky enough to see Bruce on the
Boss. Do you call him the boss, or do you call him Bruce?
Boss. He is the boss. He's the
yeah.
I think he's Bruce. He's Bruce Springsteen. It's weird when you go and see Springsteen, because everybody goes Bruce, and it sounds like everybody's booing him. And you're like, what? Yeah. So he is the boss. I like the greatest hits. So I first heard Bruce on MTV when he did a version of The River, which was great. It was released in 1980, and then 84 when he just went global with Born in the USA and Dancing in the Dark. And then he was one of those artists. It wasn't until I went to see him in 2007 on the Magic Tour, and I've been to every Bruce tour since, that I don't have that many albums. I don't know many of his songs, but to go and see Bruce Springsteen live is just it's just an experience, Matt. 3.5 hours minimum of nearly a 70-year-old man and his band just playing what they want. It's unbelievable. Yeah. I don't think you have to be a fan of Bruce Springsteen to go and appreciate him as a live act and just as a phenomenon. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good to know. 1973 was his first album, which again is amazing to be consistent, to be still performing, all this time later, and to have albums, of the caliber to be. And I've heard a couple of songs off the new album, and it's pretty good. It's very kind of 21st century Springsteen, but the boss, I should say. It's very 21st century Springsteen, but it's great, and long may he continue. Yeah, is all I would say about that.
And do you know what? Do you know what? What's really nice about Bruce is just a little aside on the letter to you album, he was given the guitar. So the guitar that he wrote the songs for the album on, he was given it by a fan who
Right.
Bruce doesn't know the name of the fan. Just gave him this guitar, and he had the guitar in his house. And obviously, everybody's on, as we were saying earlier, everybody's on lockdown. And Bruce, in his nice way, said that the fan, basically the songs fell out of the guitar, and that he wrote the album, and then he invited the E Street Band up to come and record it. So,
Wow.
and he was very nice about, as Bruce is, and his output, as you say, letter to you, but all of Bruce's output, it's 2020. The albums in the 2010s, some great albums that came out. 2000 itself, Wrecking Ball, Magic. For anybody who's listening to the podcast, if you're, if Bruce Springsteen is somebody that you've not listened to, as we say, you've got 6 decades worth of material to pick some stuff. Pick Born to Run. Pick Born in the USA. My personal favorite would be Tunnel of Love, which has got the cracking the title track itself and Brilliant Disguise. So long live the boss.
Yeah, absolutely. What a man. And what a canon of work.
Exactly.
Did you ever see that film, while we're on the subject of Bruce Springsteen, a few years ago, Blinded by the Light, set in a Luton council estate, about a guy growing up in the 80s. Funny you should mention, Born to Run and so on, Dancing in the Dark. Excellent, really good film. Really good film.
I've not seen it. I've not seen it. It's one of those ones which just kind of passed me by, because I take it, is it a bit like Rocket Man and Yesterday, where it's a story, and then they bring the songs of Springsteen into the film.
It's more Yesterday than Rocket Man, but it's very much, as you say, it's a kind of a fictional, essentially based on the writer's life, growing up in Luton and discovering Bruce Springsteen as an Asian lad in early 80s Luton. But well worth seeing, Blinded by the Light. Talking of documentaries, or rather biopics, or biopic, I'm not sure what the pronunciation is, but I'm going to say biopic. But talking of biopics, another thing that I caught a glimpse of was, I didn't catch a glimpse of, I watched it in its entirety, is the trailer for the new David Bowie film.
Okay. Yep.
Which is a dramatization of the early 69, 71 sort of Man Who Sold the World era, when he was going from David Jones to David Bowie, basically. Well, that was a little bit before, but looks quite interesting if you're a Bowie fan, which I'm not particularly. But I was quite intrigued by it. In that it looks a little bit like, and you mentioned Rocket Man earlier, and it also looks a little bit like the Bohemian Rhapsody sort of 70s piece, because it is set in that era. The same, maybe it's made by the same people, I don't know, but that's something interesting to look forward to, I think. Something. I think there are a lot of these sort of biopic films coming out at the moment, whether they be Bohemian Rhapsody or Rocket Man or The Dirt, my particular favorite, the Motley Crue story, of course. And you think, well, fair enough, I guess, if there's a market for them. Do you remember, we were talking about Lizzie earlier, we will talk a little bit about, you mentioned the Lizzie film, but there was there was talk of a Lizzie film years ago with Gary Dourdan from CSI in the lead role. I don't know whether you remember that.
I do remember. Yeah, I do remember him being cast in the role, and it all went very, very quiet. I don't know why.
Yeah. No. But anyway, that David Bowie thing looks quite interesting. I thought I'd mention that. As a visual thing.
And do you know what's good? And I think this has happened with, if you look at the interest in Queen, following Bohemian Rhapsody. For those of us who were of the, who were about when Queen were going, probably Freddie is the best front man that ever lived. We could do a top 10 on that someday.
I'm sure we will.
I'm sure we will. But I think with Bohemian Rhapsody, with Live Aid, what it does is it gets interest in the band. So I can remember when Spotify came out, and it was all there's a Bohemian Rhapsody soundtrack, etc. Same with Rocket Man. Everybody gets interested in Elton's back catalogue, and obviously what you can only hope for with David Bowie is if people are occasional fans, or people who like Bowie will go and see the film. But maybe people like myself who like periods of Bowie, maybe by watching the movie you might go, oh, I don't know this tune, I might have given this. So I think what it does, but on reflection, these are artists. I think what would be nice is biopics that come out of bands which are not mega. We've seen the Beatles, we've seen Queen. We probably know the stories to tell, but in some ways it would be nice. It's a bit like the comparison with Diamond Head, Diamond Head and Metallica. It's lovely that a big band like Metallica give Diamond Head a bit of a shout out when they're doing the garage tapes, and I think it would be nice with biopics or films. Is why not pick more influential bands or artists? I one that comes off the top of my head, which was Ian Jury's biopic. Now I don't know much about that, but I'm trying to remember. It's the guy that played Gollum, Andy Serkis.
And Andy Serkis, yep.
And again, what a great documentary! But it got me interested. And when you hear the soundtrack, you're going, it's not all about hit me with your rhythm stick. It's great, and that's where I think for me as a music fan, it would be really interesting to see more biopics about bands that were maybe really influential, and actually could do with a little bit of press. That's all I can hope for with the Thin Lizzy movie is a little bit of press for the band. People get interested, and again, people might go and buy the album, stream it on Spotify. That's just a personal view.
Yeah. Do you think there should be a biopic about Sweet Savage?
Do you know what?
I can't believe you're actually going to answer that question.
Sweet Savage. You could actually no.
Those who don't know, who is Sweet Savage, by the way?
Sweet Savage were a band from Northern Ireland. I'm allowed to do the Northern Ireland accent. I'll leave you to do the Tommy Vance.
I wouldn't catch me doing it, Brian, as you know.
So Sweet Savage, band formed in the late 1970s, came out of Belfast. Probably best known for a couple of things. Their lead guitar player, Mr., as we like to call him, Sir Vivian of Campbell.
Sir Vivian O'Campbell, indeed. The much underused Def Leppard ex everyone guitarist, as previously discussed.
Exactly. Vivian was the lead guitar player in Sweet Savage. But obviously, we're a bit like Diamond Head, and we're big Nwabin band, and Metallica. I know that when Metallica did their, I think it was the 30th anniversaries concerts, they actually flew Ray Haller across to San Francisco, and the band played Killing Time, which is, I don't know if that was a track that was recorded on the Garage EP, but, just really nice that Metallica do that. So do you know what? We've already seen, so Sweet Savage, I think it would be good Northern Ireland rock, for me, a good documentary about Northern Ireland rock would be good, because you could have Mama's Boys, you could have Sweet Savage. There's a lot of good underground, and I think that would be worthy of something. To do one and just see Sweet Savage in its own, nah, can't see it.
No, okay. I only brought up
But
Sweet
thanks
Savage
for
because I know
asking.
you've got a soft spot for them.
I have.
Um, Talking about the Lizzie film, very
Yep.
quickly.
Yep.
You did say when we were talking about it off air, as we like to say, that you thought that it was kind of typical Lizzie that they released it. They released is sad really, and I'm not smiling, but they released this presumably beautifully crafted film.
Yes.
Um, songs for While I'm Away, is it called?
That's correct. Yes.
Um, at the point in time where cinemas closed down.
23rd of
It's
October. It was supposed to be hitting it was supposed to be hitting cinemas nationwide. Certainly released in Ireland on the 23rd of October. A film that's going to focus on the life and music of Phil. Songs for While I'm Away. Director Emer Reynolds. It's been a long, eagerly anticipated by fans and everybody. And
Mhm.
as you said, here we are. Lovingly Done will be beautifully curated, as I said earlier, like the box set.
Mhm.
And then you get hit with the second round of lockdown. And that is just that just to me sums up Thin Lizzy's career, where you're ready to go on tour and on the back of Live and Dangerous, the Jailbreak album. You're going to go on tour in America. Everything's all set up, and Brian Robertson cuts his hand in the speakeasy trying to save Frankie Miller. Um,
Mhm. The great
then
Frankie Miller.
the great Frankie Miller, and then of course you then replace Brian Robertson with Gary Moore, and then Gary Moore decides halfway through a tour that he doesn't fancy it, etc. And after that,
Mhm.
those two, I think it's well documented, those two episodes of things happening in America killed Thin Lizzy in America. So
Yeah.
yeah, but coming out on DVD in February, and I think that'll
Oh, is it?
be
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
it'll be
That's good to know.
it'll be coming out in DVD. And again, it's one of those things. We'll probably talk about other um, documentaries and things, which that'll be something to look forward to as we still hopefully will be out of lockdown, or at least have more access to things. But that, for me as a fan, looking forward to that when that comes out in February time.
Yeah, me too. Well, we'll have access to DVDs
Yes,
because I think they'll get posted to you.
exactly.
So I think we'll be all right in that respect. So, but yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah, thank
Right.
you. I might, me. I'll have it on I'll buy it in Blu-ray. I'll buy the
uh,
triple box signed by Uncle Tom Cobley for 90 quid. As I'm
I know you
always,
will. I
sad
know
man that
you
I
will.
am.
You're what's known as a completist, and there's nothing wrong with that.
There's not at all.
No, I understand. So yeah, so I think we've talked a lot about Thin Lizzy today, and we did say we weren't going to use these little sessions as an
Sorry,
homage to our favourite bands.
I'm sorry.
Um, but whatever, never mind. So we talked about documentaries. Looking forward to that David Bowie thing,
Yeah.
the Lizzie thing. I'll look out for. Um, it made me think about other documentaries which I have enjoyed over the years, particularly the one that springs to mind. You mentioned earlier about underground bands or little known bands. Of course, the probably the greatest uh, rags to riches and so on story is of course the story of Anvil. If you haven't seen that,
I have.
I
I
know
have
you
seen it.
probably have,
I
Brian.
have.
Yeah, I think I was talking to people in general. I was talking to our 10 listeners. Um, if you haven't seen that, then it's worth checking out. Of course,
Yes. Oh,
the
it
Anvil
is.
story.
It is just, Matt. It is a real life Spinal Tap.
Mm,
Let's be honest. Um, it's a heartfelt documentary. Lips is just such a, the fact that he his sister lends him the money to make the album with the sadly departed Chris Tangarides.
Indeed.
And then there's bits where they're off on tour and they do a show in they do a festival in Bulgaria and there's nobody there, and then they fly all the way to Japan, and it is real life Spinal Tap. But do you know what? I think you might be. Did they get onto the bill download for the next year after? So I think yeah.
Yeah, it did give them a new lease of life for sure. It certainly gave them a little boost, which is the riches part. I don't know whether it was riches as such, but they did get a nice little, a leg up into, as you say, European festivals. And I think they've done a couple of little tours, UK tours. I say little tours, UK tours and stuff. So we're just all about documentaries, and we could wax lyrical about documentaries till the cows come home. And talk about the Lemmy movie and the Springsteen and I movie, which you didn't mention earlier in the context of Bruce Springsteen, but that's worth a look as well. There's plenty out there.
And you don't need to. And to be fair, you don't. A lot of the films that we mentioned are, you can view them on Netflix, Prime.
Indeed.
Prime Video. There's lots of ways to catch up with a lot of these movies. One which isn't on any of the streaming, and for our listeners, you can watch it if you do have a YouTube account. You can watch this one for free, which from a rockumentary perspective still makes me laugh. Is the Decline of Western Civilization Part 2 for our listeners out there. If you want to see how party glam metal was in the mid to late 80s with Rats and all of the bands, etc., go and watch that movie. And even if you fast forward to near the end and watch Chris Holmes and his mum whilst Chris is drinking vodka, lying in a pool, it is just decadent. And the one sane man that comes out of the whole film, two sane men, is Lemmy and Alice Cooper.
Yes, the elder statesman.
Yes, the wild men of rock as they were.
Yeah. No, I know what you mean. I've seen bits of that, and it's kind of leaves you with a bad taste in your mouth. I think it's a bit like it's sort of so appalling at times.
It doesn't age well.
No, there's a bit with Paul Stanley in bed with umpteen women, I seem to recall.
Soft lighting as well. There's soft lighting for Paul Stanley. It's like, oh my goodness.
But there are some good, notwithstanding that one, there are some good ones out there. And then we get onto that subject. Oh yes, the Bowie film.
Yes.
Which is, to say, set in about 1970. Right, should we move on, Brian?
Yeah, we can move on, Matthew, yes.
So we were talking last time about things which are celebrating their 40th odd anniversary. We talked about 1980 as a particularly stellar year in the world of rock. I seem to recall at the time you were thinking about maybe going back a little bit further.
You set me you set me up here. I set myself up here. So you're right. We were just thinking about 1980 as a big year in heavy rock and hard rock. And then we thought, well, why don't we go back another decade and look at 1970? So in terms of what were the albums that were released in 1970 and which ones, what was kind of the top 5 albums, etc. So in some ways, it's nice to go back and have a look at some of the albums that you may or may not listen to, or albums that you go, my goodness, is that really 50 years ago? So it was an interesting challenge to go back to see what stuff am I still listening to today from 1970. So I pulled together a short list. It'd be really interesting
Yeah.
Hear what you think of these albums. So and I'll leave my favorite one to the end. If you don't, I'll leave that one to the end. So albums that were released in 1970, and there were some that I thought that were released in 1970 that weren't. So, the first one off the blocks, which again is probably one of my favorite bands in the world, and this is probably my second favorite album of theirs. It's certainly for me the best album produced by Deep Purple Mark II, which is In Rock.
Mm-hmm.
So my first offering would be Deep Purple's In Rock. It's got Speed King, it's got Child in Time, Say No More. Speed King for me is just Chuck Berry, really, 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 really fast with John Lord and Richie. Well, the thing is, it's the references to Chuck Berry, and it's like whatever Ian Gillan says. So my first one, obviously, Purple.
Good choice.
Thank you.
Great choice.
The next one, which I was quite surprised, that actually the next two that were released in 1970, and I think is a testament for lots of bands who actually their output wasn't we'll send an album out every 3 years. Two from Black Sabbath. So obviously, Black Sabbath debut album came out in February 1970, and then followed up that same year with Paranoid. So
yeah, amazing.
The birth of heavy metal. There you go, just there.
Yeah, and in two albums in relatively quick succession. Although that wasn't, even going forward to sort of the late 70s, that wasn't it wasn't uncommon to do two, maybe even possibly three, but certainly two albums in 1 year. But yeah, to do two albums of that caliber, again, probably helped by the fact that I think when they were kind of starting, they used to jam. I think Tony Iommi had ideas coming out of his ears in terms of riffs.
I was worried where you were going there.
No, keep it clean, Brian. Keep it clean. He had ideas coming out of his ears, and also I think they were quite a collective when it came to songwriting. And Geezer used to write the lyrics, and Ozzy would chip in with the lyrics. Obviously, Tony Iommi was a riff machine and still is to a large extent, and that was over the years. And they used to jam for hours and create these songs based on his amazing riffs. So in a way, it doesn't surprise. But two monumental albums. And did you say the birth of metal? I suppose.
Very much. Yeah, you do that. If I would, an interesting album that often gets overlooked. And I would recommend this just if you want a little bit of the bluesy or jazzier side of Black Sabbath. I recommend to our listeners a live album by Black Sabbath called Live at Last.
Oh yeah,
and I think on the second side. Sorry, I am talking about vinyl. But I think there's like a blues jam in the middle of the album, and it just goes into like, halftime shuffly, and Richie Blackmore gets often plauded for his blues guitar playing in the middle of segues with Purple material. But listen to Tony Iommi's blues playing on that live album. It's just unbelievable. So check it out.
Yeah, I remember getting that album. Actually, that was an unofficial release. Live at Last to cash in, I think, on their sort of resurgence in about 1980, and I bought it, Live at Last, on the NEMS label, I think, or NEMS, whatever it was. And that solo you're talking about, I remember timing it. It comes in at 27 minutes, I think.
Seriously,
I could be wrong, but it's a long solo.
It is. I've got it going through my head. So check it out. Check it out.
I will.
The fourth album, which I had on the list, is Led Zeppelin 3. I actually thought that Led Zeppelin 2, which is my favorite Zeppelin album, was actually in 1970, but I think it was 1969.
It is, yeah.
But
they did one a year for the first 4 years, didn't they? Basically,
yeah.
68 through 71, and then took a little break.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's yes, again a fantastic album. Again, from what I read, it got a little bit of criticism at the time because obviously 1 and 2 were quite heavy,
yeah.
and then they went a bit pastoral and a bit acoustic with mine's gone blank as to what's on there, but certainly it is a bit more acoustically driven,
It is.
isn't it?
It's very much. But when you, I suppose, when you listen to when you look over all of the back catalogue of Led Zeppelin, I think that's the beauty of it. So they never made an album. There never was a formula. You take all of the albums, Physical Graffiti, all of the albums are a work in itself and how the band were feeling at the time. And as you say, they were very, very much influenced by the folk and acoustic. And I think Jimmy was just exploring with the rest of the band, and John Paul Jones, the multi-instrumentalist there he is. So Led Zepp 1970, Led Zepp 3 in 1970. Other notable, obviously.
Just come back to that before we move on. Led Zepp 3 has got the amazing "Since I've Been Loving You" on there, featuring John Bonham's squeaky drum pedal, of course. If you listen very closely to the studio version, his kick drum. I don't know why you would leave that in the mix, but it does add to the mystique, I suppose. But yeah, an amazing album. Sorry, I interrupted you there, Brian.
No,
but
it's fine.
Yeah, I'd forgotten how good that album is. Some great songs on it.
Well, the thing is, for everybody will now run off and have a listen to "Since I've Been Loving You" and trying to listen to John Bonham's squeaky pedal.
It's in there.
It is. I'm sure. I'm not doubting you. The other note, the last one before a notable inclusion is Layla. And Assorted Love Stories.
Assorted Love Songs.
Love Songs. Just a brilliant album. In terms of Derek and the Dominoes, some great guitar playing. Obviously Duane Allman is on the album. 1970, and I suppose from Eric's perspective, by coming out, on the back of the whole Clapton as God, to then come out with an album anonymously as Derek and the Dominoes.
Yeah.
And for that, so that's another notable inclusion. And a nice segue to my number one album that was released in 1970, which was the third solo album from the Quiet Beatle, Mr. George Harrison, on his double album, All Things Must Pass. So when you look at that, when you look at all the tracks that are on that album, obviously All Things Must Pass, Beware of Darkness, My Sweet Lord, Isn't It a Pity? For an album which George had lots of that material ready, and they were not considered they weren't considered good enough for Beatles albums. For him to pull that together, lots of the Derek and the Dominoes personnel played on that album. Many of the Badfinger album, Klaus Voormann, who was in Manfred Mann and who also designed the Revolver album, the pen drawing. So basically, George got all of his mates, Phil Spector, and produced what I thought was it was his debut solo album. I didn't know about the two other albums that he released in the 60s. But to me, in my quest to find the best albums released in 1970, I offer you, Matt, my number one album, which I do listen to quite regularly, Mr. George Harrison, and All Things Must Pass.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, I shall. I'll check that out. Yeah, I'd say I obviously I'd kind of not really invested much time in George Harrison as a solo performer, but I will. I'll take a listen. When we were talking about 1970. You and I were both very young in 1970. I mean, we were there.
Just
I started school in 1970, and Jimi Hendrix released Band of Gypsies in 1970, the album, and he sadly passed away in 1970, age 27. And I remember it. I remember him dying. Actually, I was only 5 at the time, and I remember something reminded me. When we were talking about it earlier, I remember being in Woolworths, and it must have been some sort of like in Thetford where I was brought up. There must have been some sort of memorial, or his albums were on display or something. But I do remember it. Funny enough, my first musical memory is Penny Lane by the Beatles when I was 2, in my grandma's kitchen in Muswell Hill, listening to. It was on, must have been on the radio, and I must have been. I don't know why I remember it and why that stuck in my head, but I do remember Penny Lane by the Beatles when I was young. And finally, as I probably said to you before, Ticket to Ride was #1 when I was born. So I'm like you. I do have a sort of link to the Beatles in a strange sort of way. That was a little bit self-indulgent, really, but I thought I'd give you that little insight into what it was like growing up in the early '70s Thetford, and particularly Woolworths.
Well, your choice is a lot more rock and roll than mine. I think my first musical memories were buying Elton John's "Song for Guy" as my first single, and then following up with the Barron Knights' "Remember Decimalization."
So there's one really good song there, and one not so. And I'll leave everyone to decide which one.
Yeah, everybody's going to go to Spotify now and try to find where's the Barron Knights? Who are they? What are they?
Yes. Unbelievable. But why not? You got to start somewhere. Well, that's some great choices there, Brian.
Thank
you.
I
was thinking, 1970 was, I think, you touched upon this before. It was kind of the birth of metal, post, Altamont and, the Summer of Love, and it was all going a bit sort of, moving into the 70s, and things weren't as kind of, flowers in your hair as maybe it was purported to be.
Yeah.
And Sabbath obviously reflected that a little bit in their music, and then you had the kind of harder edge of Purple and so on. And I was thinking it is quite a seminal year, 1970.
Yeah.
And we talked about 1980 last time, as being, for rock and metal fans, a kind of a pivotal year, the out with the old, in with the new type of thing, new wave of British heavy metal and so on. And maybe it's, I don't know whether anyone's ever explored this, but maybe it's a 10-year cycle thing. Because if you fast forward to the 89, 90, with grunge, out with hair metal, which fortunately had a very short lifespan, out with that, and in with grunge, and to an extent bands like the cream of the crop, if you like, the hair metal rose to the top. Bands like Racer X, and obviously then subsequently became Mr. Big and so on. Maybe it's a 10-year cycle thing. I don't know whether anyone's ever thought of that, to be honest with you. But certainly, as I say, 70, 80, 90 does seem to be a sort of pattern emerging there.
Do you know what would be interesting? So your challenge. So you set me the challenge of
yes
of who were of Bry's favorite 19 albums from 1970. I will set you the challenge for next time. 1990. What were Matt's favorite albums?
Challenge accepted, exactly. My friend.
And I think, do you know what I think will be interesting is it'll be interesting. What albums were released in 1990 that you like, and then I think what we should do as we go along is, right, we've picked the 10-year cycle, but as when you look at 1970, it'll be interesting if we pick, say, the middle of the decade. So say we go to 1975. At that point in 1970, prog wasn't big, but in 1975, You're probably dealing with "Wish You Were Here." Again, forgive me, listeners, I haven't checked this out, but you're probably looking at
75. "Wish You Were Here." That's right. Yeah.
So you're looking at "Wish You Were Here" in 1975. Yes would have been putting out product. Genesis would have been putting out product, and then what was happening in popular charts, and do you know what? You've got bands like, where was Judas Priest, for example, and so where was rock in that period? because then when we get to 1977, you've got punk exploding. So I think it'll be really interesting to just, for us, as we go through the decade, if we start at each of the beginning of the decades and then we follow rock through the decades, is where were we? Because 1993 is probably when Nirvana was, it'd be interesting to see when did 10 Nevermind really kick in, and when was the sort of the cycle reset for rock around that. So your challenge 1990 for next episode, young man.
Okay, I'm on it. Thank you very much. One other thing that I just want to touch on, and we're sort of running a little bit out of time, I think, maybe. Maybe we're not. Was you mentioned the late 70s, and I came across recently a running order of the first of a radio show that we all used to listen to when we were young, growing up in the late 70s, early 80s, the Friday Rock Show, hosted by the great Thomas the Vance, TV on the radio, of course, one of my heroes, and a hero to many. I came across the running order. I think it was somewhere in 1979. It had an early session by Iron Maiden, which essentially was the Soundhouse tapes in a Friday Rock Show session.
Yeah.
Well worth a listen if you can find it. But Friday Rock Show. Again, for kids of that age, or people of that age, a must listen to on a Friday night. Obviously, hence the name, Friday Rock Show.
Yeah.
You'd to come back from the youth club or the pub.
It was the youth club for me. I left the grammar school Friday night youth club, and legged it home, and usually had my mum, or I had a preset that it would start recording for 10 was it 10 o'clock? 10 o'clock to midnight?
10 till midnight, yeah.
10 to midnight. And
occasionally a bit longer.
Yeah.
But yeah, typically that.
And for me, I loved it for the fact that you got to hear bands. You got to hear bands you never heard of. You also it was just like the weekly news. It's like what's happening in rock, what singles are coming out. I loved it for Donington and all of the exclusive. I always remember. I still have it. The Donington 1984 recording of Gary Moore. When he told everybody that he would never play Parisian Walkways again, and he played it. And there was so many brilliant live sessions, etc. And it's funny, actually, if you don't mind, when we were talking about stuff in the news this week, lots of the festivals for 2021. Fingers crossed that we'll get them. Obviously, Donington. Have announced more acts that are going to be on the Donington bill for next year. Sorry, download bill. See, when we're talking about Tommy Vance, I want to talk about Monsters of Rock and Donington. But Download's got a lot more bands announced, and Sweden Rock, which I have to do Sweden Rock one year, and I know our friend Brian Heeson. I think it was either his 50th this year or maybe his 50th next year, and he wants to do Sweden Rock. And it was really interesting that when I saw there's 81, I think it was over 80 acts over the 4 days have just been announced. And a band that I've never seen in the UK, but I was introduced by TV on the radio, was Saga. Saga just came up. You know what Tommy Vance was like? He'd play this tune, and you could have been listening to Jethro Tull or Yes or Maiden or Def Leppard, and this thing came in. I don't know if it feels like 1985, 86, and Misbehavior or I can't remember the name of the track, and it just hit me right between the eyes. and I went, oh my goodness, that is Saga. Oh, I remember, the way you're listening back on the recording that you've made, and you're, at this point you've got no editing. You like, if I want to listen to Saga, I have to go to 15 minutes in on side B of the tape that I've recorded. But Saga are playing, they're playing Sweden Rock next year, and then other acts like Lee Aaron, who was always on.
She was always in.
She was always in Kerrang.
In Kerrang, trying to titillate the readers, of course.
Lisa Dominic as well,
and successfully doing so. I always thought Saga were. I always thought they were German, or continental for some reason, but they're Canadian, aren't they? Or were they?
I thought they were English. I thought they were.
No, they're from. Yeah. From Great White North, from Canada.
Great White North.
I think that's what they're called. Anyway, that was the beauty, wasn't it? You would. I think that you just hit the nail on the head. Actually, there was a sort of show where you would hear something and your ears would prick up, and you think, "I'll have a bit of that. I'll go out, buy that song, buy the album." And it was a great vehicle for, and we've still got that to an extent with rock radio, but it was quite groundbreaking in that respect. But I just went down memory lane a little bit. I was reminded, of course, by the fact that I had a request read out on the Friday Rock Show, which in those days you couldn't just tweet or email or whatever. You had to get a little postcard and write the message and send it off and all the rest of it. And we got a message read out for a Whitesnake song. So that was the icing on the cake for me. But being, having my name mentioned by the great Tommy Vance. So that was just something that popped into my head this week.
I know. Yeah, exactly. And one of the things that for anybody who is active on Facebook, I know that there's a great Facebook page where is it Friends of Tommy Vance or Friends of the Friday Rock Show?
Friday Rock Show 1978 to 1993.
Yeah.
And it's littered with great memories, and as all those Facebook, well-managed pages are. As indeed our Facebook page will be when it gets
populated with materials.
When it's populated with material and gets lots of followers. More to come on that, of course.
Good.
Anyway, where were we? So the Friday Rock Show, good memories. And sadly, we lost TV to Tommy Vance too early. He was only 54, which is quite a sobering thought when he died in 2005. So, but on that site, funnily enough, on that Friday Rock Show site, Tony Wilson, who was the original producer, or was the producer of the Friday Rock Show, and to be honest, he was the kind of the rock fan. He's a member of that site, so he occasionally chips in with little nuggets of information about the Friday Rock Show and all that. But for anyone growing up in the late 70s, early 80s, a must listen to, and something which is very kind of that time, really. Yeah. Okay. Now that was it. I mean, that was all I wanted to talk about the Friday Rock Show. To be honest with you.
No. It's as I say, it's the Friday Rock Show. It's where we found a lot of our bands, and I think with a lot of rock bands, and we talked about this with the likes of Pete Frame, for those of us who are the completists. I love the fact that you can go from UFO to Whitesnake to Thin Lizzy to Wild Horses to Scorpions, through the, it's through that reading the back catalogue, reading the back of an LP. We talked about Chris Tangarides earlier on, who, probably one of the greatest metal producers of all time, and you look at the back of it and you go, who's produced it? Someone else who sadly departed recently was Martin Birch. And we could probably do a show on all of the albums that Martin, but that's the whole point of that. That's that you go to you listen to Tommy Vance and you went down to the record shop, nearly went American and said down to the record store. You went down to the record shop and you said, can I get the new Gary Moore single, and can I get the new Gary Moore album? And in the back of it, and you're going, who's Jeff Glixman? he produced this album, and you just devour Kerrang, and then you're looking at the back pages of Kerrang around what tours are coming up, and then you finish off the week with TV, who's going to back you up and say, yeah, that tour's definitely happening, or like me in Northern Ireland going, yeah, that tour's happening in the UK, and nobody's ever going to come. Nobody's ever going to come to Northern Ireland. It's that whole thing which Facebook's great at now. You know the way where it's and here we have Kiss. Kiss are coming to do an extensive UK tour, and the tour is London, Manchester, and Newcastle, and then everybody on Facebook goes, what about Wales? What about Scotland? And it's like everybody in the mainland. And for years, Northern Ireland, we were kind of going, we never got to see anybody. And in 1990, basically the whole of metal in Northern Ireland, when Iron Maiden came in 1990 on the No Prayer for the Dying tour, Matt, they played the King's Hall. Wolf Spain, Blaze Bailey's band. When Iron Maiden came to the King's Hall, I think everybody that I knew, you had no problem getting a lift from Limavady to Belfast that night, because everybody I knew, we all had tickets. So it was always with that tinge when you're listening to Friday Rock Show. It was like, and such is playing at, Leicester, De Montfort. I knew all the names of all of the halls. A lot of them sadly gone now. But, all of these places that you would go to, the Marquee, luckily I've been to the Hammersmith Odeon, but lots of the venues where it'd be like, you'd be reading Kerrang going, oh, look who's playing at Hammy-O, look who's playing. And they're like, they'd never in a month of Sundays ever come to Belfast to play. But there you go.
Yeah, well,
things have changed.
Well, at least you got to see Maiden.
I did.
In 1990.
I did.
And Dio, who I remember you saw. We'll talk about that some other times. Anyway, so I was thinking about ideas for the next podcast, which we will do in a few weeks.
Yeah.
Obviously, we're always interested in people's ideas, and we had a few ideas coming from people.
Yes.
Which is good. Themes and whatever. We touched on a few today. What I'd like to talk about next time is gigs that we're looking forward to next year. Ooh. That hopefully, fingers crossed, everything crossed, literally everything crossed, things start to ease up next year and we go to... Obviously, that's not the priority. The priority is getting everyone safe and well and so on. But of course, there's a lot of people out there who, as you mentioned earlier, really would love to go to Download or Rambling Man or Reading or wherever. Or even indoor gigs, your little tiny, 200-person gigs, which are just impossible at the moment. So, we could talk about. I'd like to talk about gigs we're looking forward to in 2021 or two. Yeah. Maybe not. Hopefully not 2022, but you never know with Ozzy. I mean, it might be late 2022 before we get to see him. I'd also like to talk about you and I have touched. We talked about it last time. Some of the people that we've had the pleasure of meeting over the years, whether they be Bernie Marsden signing your guitar or Damon Johnson not giving me a pick out of his pocket. But I'd like to talk about guests.
We sound like Thin Lizzy stalkers.
I know. Yeah. One thing we won't talk about next time is Thin Lizzy.
Okay.
That said, someone said to me, "Oh, I'd never really thought much about Thin Lizzy, so thanks for introducing me to them." So it's not always a bad thing. Fantasy guests, I guess guests that we'd like to have on the show. Not that we would. I mean, a lot of our friends have offered to be guests on the show, which is very kind of them. But I was thinking maybe your Tony Iommi's and your, who knows, Scott Gorhams of this world, maybe just a fantasy list, possibly.
That sounds really, really good. I'm sure I will probably come up with one or two people who may have lived or still live in Katy in Texas, possibly
yes.
Possibly may have relocated to Los Angeles and probably play in every single project with George Lynch and sing with everybody whilst King's X are off the road. Oh, sorry, did I mention King's X?
Well, I think you should, because you're being very cryptic there. In fact, we talked about them last time, didn't we? This three-piece band from Texas, and I'm sure people were thinking, is that ZZ Top? But of course, we were talking about King's X, of course.
Who are
Your
my
second favorite?
Who are my favorite band in the world?
Oh, they are now. I thought it was Lizzie. Oh, you've changed. Look at that. And you've changed in an hour from Lizzie to. At least I'm consistent.
Exactly. And as I say, fantasy guests. If any of our listeners are out there and you come up with a really good idea that we deem good for us to have a chat about, we may invite you on board, or we might just steal your idea and just pawn it off as something that we've come up with ourselves. So
yeah, probably that one, probably the latter. I would say, but you never know. Yeah, you never know. So yeah, that's those are my ideas. Right, we should talk again next time. Maybe if you're lucky, I shall do some of my rock impersonations.
Exactly. Yeah, one of the things I'd like us to talk about, which I always think is really interesting as well too, is when does a band going out with one or none of its members, is it truly a band, or is it a tribute band? Be really good for us to explore the pros and cons, the rights and the wrongs of how bands are still out there when maybe not too many of the original members are there. Be good for us to discuss that as well too.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And of course, we can talk about Diamond Head in that bracket, so I'll be happy with that. Okay, that's it.
Thank you, Matt. Always good to speak to you, mate.
You too, my friend.
Next time, thanks to everybody for listening, and we will see you all very, very soon and speak to you soon. Bye now.
Yep. Rock on. See you guys.